You wanna know what I got in here? Lenses. And in today's video, we're gonna go over lenses, what focal lengths I like to use, and when I like to use them. Now, before we get into the guts of this video, let's talk about the differences between APS-C sensor cameras, or crop sensor cameras, and full frame cameras. Canon crop sensor cameras have a crop factor of 1.61x. So if you put a 17mm lens on a Canon crop sensor camera, you're actually getting a 28mm lens, or 27.4 for all you fellow math nerds. This may not seem like a huge difference, but look at how much image you lose at 17mm versus 28mm. So just keep that in mind if you have a crop sensor camera and you want to shoot ultra wide. You probably want to get somewhere around a 10 to 12mm lens.
Hi, Editing Nate here. I just wanted to go over something that Talking Head Nate forgot to explain. Why APS-C sensors crop. This fancy 3D diagram shows us what is projected by your lens to the image sensor inside your camera. This blue outline is a full frame sensor, or the actual part that is doing the data collecting. The eye, if you will. Now, let's overlay an APS-C sensor. As you can see from the size of the APS-C sensor, whose eye is outlined in green, a full frame sensor is much larger, 1.61 times larger to be exact. The same image is being projected by the lens to the inside of your camera, but the sensor that can see the image is smaller. This is where the crop comes in. It's the same projection, but less sensor is there to see it. I hope this helps. Now, let's get back to Talking Head Nate. Bye!
As I'm going through these lenses, focus more on the focal lengths and how I'm using them. I took this photo with the Canon 75 to 300mm kit lens, which is arguably the worst lens of all time. I think this goes to show that you don't need the best gear to get a good photo. There are tons of classifications for lenses, but to keep this simple, I'm going to break it down into two parts: primes and zooms. The main advantage of a zoom lens is you have multiple focal lengths in one lens. The first lens I want to talk about in the zoom category is the one I'm filming with right now, the Canon 17-40 f4L. I like to use this lens when I want an ultra wide look, or I have to be really close to the stage and there's not a lot of room to move around, especially when there's no photo pit, or when I'm filming with my Canon R. Even though the R is a full frame camera, when you shoot in 4K, it still crops to 1.6, so I'm really starting out at 28mm. Now you might be asking, is f4 enough when you're shooting in super low light conditions? With these new mirrorless cameras, it absolutely is. You can shoot at super high ISOs and noise isn't an issue. The next lens in the zoom category that I like to carry is the Canon 24 to 105 f4L. If I could only pick one lens to use for the rest of my life, this would be it. This lens probably has the best all-around range that can cover almost any scenario. 24mm is still wide enough that if you're in tight spaces, you can still get a lot of your subject in frame. But then if you find yourself roaming around the back of the crowd, you still have the 105 to get close-ups of the stage. Now the last zoom lens that I use quite a bit is the Canon 80 to 200 f2.8L. This is an old lens. It was made in the early 90s, but I won't give it up, mainly because it's black. I don't think I've ever used this lens when I was in the photo pit, maybe sometimes when there's a really high stage. This is mainly used from behind the crowd. Sometimes I'll even use this lens for front of house shows, but it just depends on how far back the soundboard is. This lens is a perfect example to show that you don't need new gear to take great photos, and these new mirrorless cameras can really breathe new life into old equipment. Now, I want to throw an honorable mention in here. I don't actually own this lens, but I do rent it from time to time. That's the Tamron 150 to 600 G2. Now, I got real specific with the model number here because I'm still using EF glass on an RF camera, and I have seen online that some of the older versions can have focus hunting issues. So you want to get the G2 and make sure it's updated with the latest firmware. I use the 150 to 600 when I know I have a big front of house show coming up. This lens is tack sharp, even handheld at 600mm, which is pretty awesome. Now I know that Sigma has a 150 to 600 in both their contemporary and sport lines. I haven't used it myself, but I have used Sigma lenses in the past, and I can guarantee that it's probably just as good. Alright, let's get artsy now and get into the prime lenses. Primes are normally lighter, smaller, and have a wider aperture. Although the downside to primes are you have to carry more lenses with you to cover more focal lengths. The first prime that I want to cover is the Canon 28 f1.8. This is just teetering on the edge of what I would consider a wide lens. So you're not going to get that normal look you would from a 35 or 50. Again, just like the 17 to 40, this is my go-to lens if I'm in a really small venue, close to the stage, and there's no photo pit. The next prime that I like to carry is the Canon 50 f1.4. Now this isn't the Canon Nifty 50, which would be the 50 f1.8. I have used the Nifty 50 in the past, but I found this was a little sharper, so I ended up buying a used one. But the Nifty 50 will get you by just fine, and it's cheaper. I love to use this lens for artist portraits, or when I'm in the photo pit and I want to get a mid shot of a subject. You can get some really cool looks with this paper thin depth of field, but sometimes getting the correct thing in focus can be a bit of a struggle. With such a thin depth of field, your camera could lock onto the eyes, and by the time it actually takes the photo, the subject could have moved. I usually bump this up to f2 or higher, just so I have a little bit more depth of field to work with. Fun fact for you, a 50mm lens on a full frame camera gives you about the same view as what the human eye sees. The last prime lens I usually have in my kit is the Canon 85 f1.8. This lens is great for getting close-ups with a super shallow depth of field. This is my go-to lens at places like Stage AE, where the stage is about 5 foot high and artists usually are pretty far back on the stage. This is also a good lens to use behind the crowd. If you're going to use this one in the photo pit, probably expect to only get close-ups with it. Now on the zoom side, the 24 to 105 would be the ultimate lens that I would carry with me at all times. If I had to pick a prime, it would probably be the 50mm. If you're on a crop sensor camera, I would go with the 28 or 35. 50 can be a little close up when you're in the photo pit, but if you're not afraid to move around, you can make it work. Just don't step in front of another photographer. Now obviously these aren't all the focal lengths that are available, so if you have a favorite focal length, leave it in the comments below. So there you have it. My lens collection. The focal lengths that I like to use when I'm shooting concerts. Now if you learned something in this video, please like, subscribe, and share. But I'm tired of being in front of the camera, so I'm getting out of here.